All right. Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back from Thanksgiving. I hope everyone had a great week last week with friends and family and hopefully a little bit of time off. And we're going to kick in today with going through our authorities for challenge cost sharing cooperative management agreements. First off, I'm Heather Burke. I'm the National Partnership and Volunteer Coordinator for the Corps. And these agreements, it's probably the longest title of any partnership agreement we have. So you will hear me refer to it throughout the rest of this time as either cooperative joint management or co-management. Before we get into it, I just want to remind folks to please mute your mics if you haven't done so already. We will have time at the end for questions, but you can also type questions in the chat as we go. I will try and monitor that. If I happen to miss it during the presentation, I'll definitely hit it at the end. And I've already started recording this, so we'll have the recorded slides, and then I'll also post the PowerPoints on the NRM Gateway Partnership Training page. So this authority, we're talking about it now because it plays heavily into our FY26 NRM Strategic Staffing and Operations Plan. Hopefully by now everyone has seen this. It was an email that was sent out by Mr. Hill and Jeff Krause on October 22nd. And this plan basically outlines different strategies that we are going to use to keep our recreation areas open in FY26. So things like outgrants, cooperative management, a higher use of youth conservation corps, contracts, volunteers. We're looking at every possible strategy we can to keep parks open, with the last resort then of using the exemption, the ETPs, for hiring on summer help. And our priorities under that plan and that strategy is safe public access, public health and safety, and then supporting local communities and economies. So this is coming at the direction of our Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, who has basically said to Congress, we will do everything we can to keep our parks open. And so this is a very timely presentation here to talk about one of the tools that you can use. And in that plan, Mr. Hill did say that we will implement this cooperative joint management at 25 of our parks during FY26. So it's a pretty lofty goal, but glad to have everyone on here today to hear more about it. So our authority to do co-management originally came from WRDA 2016, and then we had an update to that in WRDA 2024. Initially, we could only do this joint management with non-federal public entities, and then in WRDA 24, we added nonprofit entities to that. The policy that we currently have out there is under ER 1130-2-500, Chapter 14. That was published in April. Unfortunately, it was published right when we got this new authority from WRDA. So we didn't get the nonprofits in that published ER. So we actually have a policy memo that's just waiting for Mr. Hill's signature. Hopefully, I'm hoping maybe it'll go out this week, that adds that additional part about the nonprofits. So the thing that makes this different than any of our other partnering authorities, because it's actually an amendment to our traditional challenge partnerships. I know a lot of people out there have done traditional challenge partnership agreements. This was an amendment to that authority. It actually allows our partner to collect, retain, and reinvest the fees. None of our other partnering authorities allow that. Full out grants do, but not a partnering co-management situation. So non-federal public, nonprofit, and it doesn't matter whether the sites had been constructed by us or by another entity. Maybe we had a previous partnership or something like that. As long as we are managing those parks, they're open for co-management. The authority also allows the partner to use our visitor reservation service, so R1S, rec.gov. They can run those fees through that, and the Forest Service and Booz Allen Hamilton, the contractor, have worked out a system to get those fees directly back to that partner. And they are able to retain up to 100% of the fees collected. So far, we haven't had anyone set up an agreement where they would retain less than that, but that is the way the law was written. But for the most part, we're probably going to have them collect all the fees, retain them, and reinvest them. And it has to be at the recreation site where the fees are collected. Now, this is another thing. We have some external assistants and interested parties who are looking to maybe get that law changed, and that would eventually allow the use of those fees anywhere on the civil works project. For right now, the way the law is written, the fees have to be reinvested where they were actually collected at that PSA. So the eligibility, who can do this with us? So the first category was the non-federal public entities. So that's state, county, local, municipal governments, but it also includes public universities. So like a state university, if they had maybe a recreation program, might want to be involved in co-management. And then Indian tribes. So those are the ones that fall under the non-federal. And then the private nonprofits are your 501Cs, and that's according to the Internal Revenue Code. And I've got a slide next that will show you the various 501Cs that are out there. And then the eligible area are project site areas on core fee title land or on any land that we fully operate and maintain. We do have a couple projects where we operate and maintain on tribal lands, and those parks are eligible for co-management as long as we're the ones that are operating and maintaining those. So the types of nonprofits, in case you aren't aware, the one we hear about the most is the 501c3, and that's the one we work the most with, but there are quite a few nonprofit organizations. So this is something I think opens up more opportunity for us, thinking a little more outside the box than we normally do, as far as 501s that we might be able to work with to co-manage parks. Now, a lot of these would have no interest probably in managing parks, but you never know. So we'll talk about how you advertise these opportunities and maybe drum up some interest here. There is a competition requirement. We want to make sure that we aren't just giving this opportunity to one entity and then someone else is like, hey, I really would have liked to co-manage with you. So we require a notice to eligible entities, and it's got the criteria and the evaluation methods in there, and it's developed by the OPM, and then also has review by the district operations chief and district commander. The information that should be included in this, and I've got an example on another slide, but it would have the names of the recreation areas that you are considering for co-management, because you may have areas that just aren't really ripe for that opportunity. You would want to include the average annual revenue generated, because this is what will spark some interest in some of our partner organizations, make it worth their while. You would put the expectations of the partner, so what services we're looking for them to take over, the typical duties, the length of time for the agreement. We can do from up to 15 years, initial 10 plus 5. The required experience, how they should submit their proposal, what your selection criteria, and how you'll evaluate. So those are things that should go in that notice. That is sent out by the district commander, or at least under the district commander's authority. And it can be through website, social media, press release, bulletin boards. We do say that it needs to be on the NRM Gateway or other public website at a minimum, and it must go out for at least 10 calendar days. So those are the requirements for that competition. And if there are a couple of partners that want to submit a joint proposal, maybe one entity doesn't feel like they have the capability to do this on their own, they may want to jointly propose with another entity to co-manage, and it can be one or more project site areas. This is something we recently sent out. We started out with just kind of a Word document, and then I've got another slide with with a more of a handout that can be used. And I sent an example of that in the calendar invite. But we've reached out to the Society of Outdoor Recreation Professionals, the Public Lands Alliance, Public Lands Interpretive Association, Find Outdoors, that's a nonprofit that's currently operating, co-managing campgrounds with Forest Service. We sent out this information to our cooperating associations and the Recreation Resource Management of America, just trying to get the word out that, hey, we've got this authority now that we can work with nonprofits who out there might be interested. And then furthered that with a two-sided sheet that we will also be sending out to those organizations, and we'll get this posted on the Gateway. We still have a couple more minor edits we need to make, but I wanted you just to see what it should closely look like when it's finalized. And these are things that you can use if you're at any sort of like public event, like boat shows or joint events with other partners that you can have as a handout when you maybe are talking to a non-federal public entity or to a nonprofit entity, just to share some background on what we're trying to do here. So this is an example that we've been working up. The next two locations that we'll be putting out advertisements for interest is Carter's Lake in Georgia. So this is an example from Carter's. And then Philpott in Virginia is also working on one of these. Just a note, you may advertise that you have 3, 4, 6, 10 parks that you are looking for co-management, but that does not mean that the partner might be interested in all of those. So one of the key things about all of this is there's a lot of flexibility, but it's good to go ahead and put out there, okay, here's the parks that we think would be best for co-management, and see if anyone is interested in some or in all of them. So once that period of competition closes, then you would be evaluating those proposals, looking at their financial and technical resources, making sure that they could execute a program like this. If what's their history with managing recreation areas, past experience. And then the selection is done by the OPM makes recommendations to the district operations chief, district commanders, and the district commander is the final approval and signature on these agreements. So this is an example when Lake Lanier first put out their notice and then made their selection. This was a memo of who they had selected, and this was just their memo for record. And then the required document, there's 2 required documents. This is the first one, the Challenge Cost Sharing Cooperative Management Agreement. And this is a template document and that has been approved. It's required. It has the terms, condition, general responsibilities of the Corps and partners, and it basically any deviations that you want to do from this template, if they're minor, can be approved at the district level. But if there's anything substantial that would be changed in that document, that would need to go up to this would be in this case Mr. Hill, the Director of Operations and Regulatory. These must be signed by the district commander. They can't be delegated down to the ops chief or the OPM. And they are limited to an initial term of 10 years with 5 additional option years without further competition. And beyond that 15 years, then the partner would need to recompete if they're interested in continuing the co-management. But if you've had a successful partnership for 15 years and they've been running the parks really well, they're going to compete really well too. But it's just, again, for fairness, there may be other organizations in that 15 years that start to see the benefits of doing co-management and they want a chance to. And so we provide that to them through that competitive process. So the template, if you've done a challenge partnership agreement before, you'll notice this looks very similar. And that is because it was an amendment of that challenge partnership authority. So you have all your typical whereas and the sections that say who is going to do what. It's very boilerplate. For the most part, there really shouldn't be much you need to change. It's kind of a plug and play, fill in the info. The next part is where you really get into the details, and that's a partner operations plan. So this is the second document that's required, and this is developed by the OPM and the partner, and it outlines who is going to do what. And these are for a 2-year period, so you update them. Well, you update them annually because you have to do an annual budget, but you kind of look at a 2-year period of what you're planning to do in that time. They can be modified at any time by mutual agreement. And these do need to be run up through the district and MSC ops chief and have concurrence from our headquarters NRM branch. The partner needs to submit a 2-year budget. And again, that goes all the way up through district, MSC, and headquarters, because it's really important when we're planning out our overall rec budgets. How do we include these co-management areas, and how are we going to shift around funding based on what those partners are planning to cover for us? And they are limited to activities and funding limits that's set forth in this plan and annual budget. They can't just go off and do whatever they want. They need to do what they say they're going to do in the partner operations plan. They are encouraged to use the R1S reservation service. We do have the parks that initially joined at Allatoona and Lanier are counties co-managing, and they had their own service, so they are using their own. And that could happen again, but where possible, we would like the partner to use the R1S system. It helps us with financial management and tracking. We can see it all in our reports when we roll them up. They can also collect recreation user fees and special use permit fees. As I said before, they can retain up to 100% of those fees, use them at the PSA where they were collected. And they can only charge fees that we can. So they have to use our fee schedule. They have to accept the America the Beautiful pass and the core annual day use passes. They don't have to sell them, but they have to accept them. They can charge fees for outdoor rec equipment and services just like we can. And then everything, all the money that they collect needs to be used in accordance with that approved annual budget and that partner operations plan. They can use those fees to fund contractors, partner staff. They can hire on term, temporary, seasonal, permanent. That helps with their ability to manage those, co-manage those parks. And then they need to provide an annual statement of receipts and expenditures so that we can make sure that they've actually done what they agreed to do in those partner operations plan. So how the R1S use works, this is pretty detailed, but we had a conversation not that long ago with the contractors and Forest Service just to make sure we were ready to go with them using the R1S. The facility is flagged in the system as being operated by a partner. And so the Forest Service transfers that money to the partner instead of to the Corps or the Treasury. Booz Allen Hamilton sets up an ID. They call it a concessionaire, but they're not concessionaires, but that's their terminology. And they just need a copy of that agreement to know who to pay, how long it's for, what facilities are operated, and their bank info so they can pay the partner every 2 weeks. And all the costs, including fees, are in the price tag. So the CLINs come out of the total fees. And then distributions made on when the reservation is made, not when the camping occurs. So if someone is making a reservation in December, but they're not camping until April, the money is going to be paid to the partner when that reservation is made. And so they do have systems in place. If there's cancellations, as far as to the customer, they'll get a refund other than that cancellation fee. That'll come out of the next 2-week payment. So the Forest Service and Booz Allen Hamilton won't ever be asking the partner for money. They will roll it into future receipts. And then, as I mentioned before, the ATB passes, the partners must accept them, that they're not required to sell them. Now we have customers can purchase digital passes, so that'll be really handy. If the partner does want to sell the passes, they would essentially have to buy them up front and resell them at the same cost. They can't sell them at a higher rate. And then in R1S, the partner will have permissions to access that, and both the partner and the Corps can have profiles to see the reservation data in those jointly managed facilities. I know that's a lot of detail, but we've had people ask questions on how exactly does this work in the reservation side. So we wanted to provide that so you understand how that's working on the back end. As far as in the parks, the partner can construct facilities. They can acquire whatever equipment they need to operate and maintain that, as long as it's been approved in that operations plan. Anything that they construct or buy for the operation that has been bought from those user fees becomes our property. So if they co-manage for 5 years and then decide they're not interested anymore, anything they bought that had been funded from those user fees will be ours to keep. If they can show that they did outside fundraising and they paid for something with outside funds, then that would be theirs, but they would have to do really good record keeping to make sure that that's outlined clearly. We can loan them equipment, provide them equipment, materials, and supplies to operate and maintain that. They can use our government-owned vehicles, vessels, as long as they have proper training and licensing. So in that sense, it's very similar to like volunteers or other partners that we've had in parks that use our equipment to assist us. And then this is a really key point and really helpful to us, is they can procure and manage contracts for services that they need to operate that park. So they can have gate attendants, they can have cleaning, mowing, landscaping, etc. And that can be really helpful to us because, as most people know who have worked with contracts, they can be really expensive in the Corps just for the administration part. And the outside world may be able to do that much more efficiently, quicker, and cheaper than we can. A couple key points. These agreements do not require an outgrant or any other form of real estate interest. And that's because we are co-managing. We are not turning these over like an outgrant. So we are still invested in those parks. We are still having partial management of that. So there's no real estate required. If the partner wants to do activities beyond the scope of their agreement, like maybe they want to have a camp store, or they want to set up a marina, they would need to basically compete for that opportunity just like any other entity would. They don't get a preference or an advantage because they are in that co-management agreement with us. And then there's no fixed rate of cost share. This is completely flexible. At a minimum, we should be providing visitor assistance ranger patrols. But a good rule of thumb is that the partner's contribution should be proportionate to the revenue they're taking in. So if they're taking in $100,000 a year, they should be contributing that back in. There should be a benefit to us. This is supposed to be for efficiencies. So we want to make sure that we are saving an appropriate amount of money, because budgets will be impacted. And this is the question we get all the time. If they are collecting $100,000, is my budget going to get decreased by $100,000? No, it will not be one-to-one, but your budgets will be reduced somewhat. We haven't set it in stone, but we're looking at probably like an 80%, a 20% decrease. So you get 80% of your regular budget, but that's also going to depend on what the partner's collecting, how much they're actually investing. So that will be flexible as well. The goal is that you get a benefit by those partners being there. And then some of those cost savings that you have, you would be able to reinvest in either like backlog maintenance or maybe some capital improvements in those parks that you wouldn't otherwise be able to afford. So just to recap on the required documents: no real estate instrument. You must have the challenge cost sharing cooperative management agreement signed by the district commander. You must have the partner operations plan, and that is approved. it's signed by the OPM, but it has to be approved through the MSC Ops Chief and up to the headquarters NRM branch. And then the partner budget has to be a part of that partner operations plan. So the benefits to us, we get that cost savings. So the partner's taking over some of that O&M costs. That helps us address critical backlog maintenance. We may have less contracts that they can take over, more efficient. Those parks that are being co-managed might not be impacted by the shutdown, or if we have another shutdown or hiring freezes. So that makes them still available to the to the public, which is our #1 mission priority here. We might be able to have better services, longer seasons. So this is a way that we might be able to keep areas open that are at risk of closure or having shorter seasons as our budgets decrease or run flat. In contrast to a full out grant, we still get to count our visitation at those co-managed PSAs. So that helps with your benefit cost ratios. And then the fee retention, the partner collects those fees and reinvests them directly back into that park. From the partner side of thing, they can use those fees to increase their capacity. They can bring on more staff. They can grow their organizations. They might not be able, there may be organizations that can't afford to fully outgrant an area. And so they might be able to co-manage a project site area with us. It allows them to get their feet wet. They understand the ropes before they take on a larger percentage. And the hope is that over time, the partner will take on more and more of those parks. They might start small because their capacity might be small, but over time they would grow and do more and more. They have similar missions to us, so they desire to provide recreation opportunities beyond what they already own, operate, or maintain. And then there can be that hands-on experience benefit, like I mentioned. If we do one of these with a public university, those students can have that hands-on managing, designing, construction, and that can help them with that experience, but also give them some money to pay for college. And then the bottom line is to the public is they get the park improvements, longer seasons, better services, and open parks. So currently what we have out there, we have only done these so far with non-federal public entities, and that's because we didn't get the ability to do this with nonprofits until earlier this year in January when we got the new WRDA. So there's 12 recreation areas that are being co-managed for Allatoona that are by 1 county and 8 at Lanier by 3 counties. Lanier is actually working to add 4 more day use areas in Hall County and 6 day use areas in Forsyth. And then Allatoona is in discussion with a 2nd county for a couple more campgrounds and day use areas and increasing the roles and responsibilities that they're currently doing with Bartow County. So we're seeing growth already in those 2 lakes. We're seeing successes, and the partner provided services have varied. So they can be, bottom line, they're going to always do fee collection because that's how they're going to collect and retain those fees. But park host duties, reservation system, providing internet, water and electric service, trash collection, septic cleaning, janitorial, landscaping. And then the core also is varied depending on the park, but we're doing visitor assistance and ranger patrols, some of that facility and road maintenance, natural resource management, trash collection, trail maintenance. Right now, we're in discussion with our first nonprofit that has shown some interest in co-management, and that's at Carter's Lake and Philpott Lake. And then with a public university, Western Kentucky at Barren River Lake. And I just put this note here because I'm hoping there's others that are out there that have shown interest, but maybe it just hasn't come across my desk. So if anybody else has had some partners that have reached out, or you have reached out to potential partners, I'd love to hear about that. You can either type it in the chat or at the end of the slides, maybe just mention what you've got going on at your project so that we can kind of keep track of that. As far as Allatoona, they signed their agreement in January of 24. And as I said, they're looking to expand to another county in 2026. So they have a couple, theirs are all campgrounds that are being co-managed. And those are the list of services that the partner is providing at their project. This is just a little screen capture of what their partner operations plan included. And then at Lanier, they have agreements with these 3 counties. They've had them since 2023, and they have a mix of day use and campgrounds. So it doesn't just have to be campgrounds that these partners are co-managing. And they're providing mowing, cleaning, gatehouse, fee collection. And just one item of note, these were the only non-outgranted parks that stayed open during the hiring freeze and lapse of appropriations. So this is where it can be a powerful tool because we didn't have the capability, staffing to keep those other parks open that weren't being jointly managed. And there's a little video. Like I said, this will be posted online, so you can check out a video that Hall County put together talking about how this was such a win-win scenario for the county and for the Corps and for the public. And it's going well so far. Some lessons learned, and you will probably experience this as well. There weren't necessarily partners knocking down the door to co-manage our parks. We needed to sell them that opportunity and convince them it was in their best interest. So some of the information that they pulled together that you probably would want to get together for potential partners at your projects. The financials, what's the average revenue expenditures? What's it look like, from year to year? Providing them our fee regulations, the master plan maps that show the zoning and everything, Title 36, our campground rules, OMB circular, information on the passes, ATB and core passes, utility maps, fee schedules, inventories, and then copies of the WRDA of the law. And then they walked each park with the partners to provide them, background history, issues, challenges, conditions of those parks. And I'm seeing some in the chat. Let's see, we've had some interest with a nonprofit, Clean Jordan Lake, their cooperating association looking to expand their program. Awesome. And then, are we concerned that Congress will call foul when most of the core user fees are no longer going back to the Treasury to pay a portion of our rec appropriations? No, we're not worried about that because Congress is the group that passed this law that allows us to do this. So they are telling us we should be doing this and to go forth. So not worried about that. And then, are they bound by our 385 ERP rec fees? Rec fees are set by them but approved by us. The rec fees are the same as ours. So they work on the same fee schedule that we do. What if the revenue doesn't cover their costs? Then that's one of the things that's helpful if they know the history of historical averages of expenditures and revenues and how that's broken out, like how much does mowing cost, how much does gate attendant cost, so that they know what they're getting into. They would need to be planning for that. Repairs post-flood, who pays for cleanup? On that one, again, you would need to work that out with the partner. If that's in their partner operation plan, then they would. If it's not, then we would. And yes, they do need to follow our safety rules. And a good portion of our ERs, EPs, ECs are applicable to, because again, we are co-managing. We aren't turning these over, we're co-managing these parks. All right, Lake Lanier park improvements. This is what they've done so far. So renovations to the gatehouses, installation of sheds, gates, picnic table replacement, site post replacement, heaters, Ventec stations. They were open during the shutdown. They had longer operating seasons. They have more frequent cleaning and trash removal and more frequent grass mowing. At Alatoona, they installed electronic gates at the campgrounds. They're working on fire pits and grills. And then this will help with decreasing the maintenance requirements that have been falling apart, these pedestal grills. And then work they have planned, increase capacity of the dump station, campsite renovations, repair roads, replace bathrooms. And then this is the gateway page. We have policies and procedures on there, FAQs. We've got the existing agreements and paperwork, the template documents, and some success stories there that you can refer to. So, all right, let me look over here and see federal. What about following the FAR? So they're doing their own contracting. So, this is where they're not going through our contracting rules for that. So however they would do, whether it's a county or a nonprofit, however they would do that for acquisition, that's what they would follow. And then tort claims would be a similar process that we would do for volunteers or other partners. In lapse of appropriation, were rangers still kept on to provide visitor assistance in these areas? Curious how that works. Parks were open, but were rangers kept on? Let me see if, I'm not sure if Tim Rainey or Jerry Fulton, are you on? Because I'm not sure how that worked during the shutdown.
Hey, I'm on, Heather, and no, once they exhausted all their funding from the previous year, then they were informed that we wouldn't have a ranger presence until the shutdown had been lifted or we had went to a CR. So they were fully aware of that, and then they just had more of a LE presence during that time.
Thanks, Reno. And then I don't know if Ryan Hartwig is on. Was there anything you wanted to add on any of this, Ryan?
No, really good job of covering everything that we already know. Now the question is going to be getting into this a little deeper, figuring out the things we don't know yet as a policy issue, and make policy to address it is likely what it's going to be. I'm not sure if you did make mention, Heather, I didn't hear it if you did, on what the implementation guidance will be.
The policy memo that Mr. Hill is going to sign?
Yeah.
All I mentioned was that we're waiting for it to be signed, but there's not really anything different in there, though, than what I said, other than it addresses nonprofits.
Right. Yeah. The point I want to emphasize, though, is the very first thing you kicked off with in the very first slide, just to remind everybody, hiring freeze is very much still in place. I've heard from the Assistant Secretary's office, do not expect to get any more exceptions to policy. What you have is what you have. And there is a very distinct expectation from the Secretary's office that access will remain open somehow. This is one of those somehow. So we're definitely want to focus on this as one of the opportunities that we have to maintain access and also accomplish some of the goals that were set out by the Director of Operations, Mr. Hill. So for those of you that have dipped your toe in the water, good for you. And, keep us posted on how that goes. If anybody else has questions, we'll have a broader body of knowledge to share with you here real soon. So look forward to this as an opportunity.
Thanks, Ryan.
Hey, Heather.
Other question? Oh, go ahead.
This is John out in San Francisco. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, question. In terms of, you brought up the point of potential or the reduction of our appropriated funds and budgets. If we set up an agreement and a partner withdrawals, say after a year, 1 or 2 or 3 years, what would be the process or potential opportunity to regain some of that funding that may have, our budget may have been reduced by that 20%? Over?
Pretty, pretty much the same as anything. If you've gone a few years without this budget requirement, this budget need, you're going to have a long toe uphill to adjust your I guess 5-year average plus inflation numbers back, right? So you would have to work that need through your MSC, through your district, through your MSC, to see about getting that budget back. In all reality, it'll be a tough competition. Obviously, your MSC is going to have to decide where to take that ceiling from, that kind of thing. So it's just, it is one of those things.
And to Heather's point, there's not necessarily people banging down our door to, I mean, they're looking at it from a financial perspective for them as well. So,
Sure.
We may have some folks that are interested, and then after a couple years of operation, it's not working out on in their financial side of the picture. So,
Yeah.
And obviously we're planning budgets and working on budgets 2 years out. So it's going to take some years, to your point, Ryan, to try and claw back some of that potential funding loss.
But there's a couple of things I want to point out right away here, though. Let's just say you entered into an agreement right now. You've already got your 26 budget. Well, you've got a continuing resolution to perform 26. Your 27 budget is in the books, and we let you build 28 the way you're doing anyways. That's 3 years of your normal budget right there. We wouldn't start affecting your budget, and when we do, it would only be a tiny amount, honestly, for whatever work you're not doing. So I wouldn't let the budget piece scare you. That's easy coming from a budget guy, I guess. I see all kinds of different numbers, but that isn't as big of a fear, perhaps, as it needs to be considered when we really peel into it and look. Again, 3 years of your budget's already protected. If you got into it right now, you'd have 3 years of your budget that you've already built.
Yeah, good point. Thank you for reminding me of that.
Yeah, and if the partner, bowed out after 1 year or 2 years, then you're building out those next couple of years. You might be able to adjust for that anyway. If it's further along, that's different. It's 5, 7, 9 years. That's going to be different. But if you're worried about they work with you like a year and then they back out, that may not even hit you later on. There's a question in the chat. What about places that do not have law enforcement contracts? You want to expand on that, Cassie, and come off mute? Because we don't have law enforcement contracts at all of our parks as is. That doesn't impact whether you can co-manage or not. So maybe, can you tell me a little bit what?
It was mainly just in that situation, like for Lanier, because he stated that the park rangers checked in, but like the law enforcement, their law enforcement did more patrols because they didn't. So I was just trying to figure out like how that would work for places that don't have law enforcement contracts or don't, that kind of thing, if there were still patrols in those areas or not.
Gotcha. Yeah, and this was really for the scenario of the shutdown. And, we hope that we don't go through this again. Most likely we will in our lifetimes, but maybe not for, 5 weeks or 6 weeks, whatever it was. So it shouldn't be a huge impact long term. These things are typically shorter term. So if you had a couple weeks where you didn't have rangers and you didn't have a law enforcement contract, well, that's a pretty short time frame, to deal with. It's not your daily operations year round. And then a note to make also on the Corps still having visitor assistance duties in these parks. That doesn't mean they have to be there every day. I mean, we don't have rangers in all of our parks every day when we run them ourselves. There are parks in places that the rangers have to go on TDY to get out to their areas to patrol. So um, it's not like we have to be out there constantly, but we do have to have a presence, and we do need to be able to respond. And it's very similar to we have parks that are fully run by volunteers. And in those areas, they are not enforcing Title 36. They're not allowed to. So they have to reach out to a ranger if there's an incident in that park. And that would be the same thing here, that the co-managed partners could reach out to us and we would respond. And then Jason just put a plug in for R1S in the chat if people are monitoring the chat. If you can't see the chat, I'll just read it out loud. He said, shameless plug for R1S. If you have parks not on rec.gov or not using the self-service tools available, reach out to me, especially for day use fees. Rec.gov parks can do very well at running themselves. Thanks, Jason.
Want to second that motion as well. In that it'll make, the financial back end of this piece so much easier rather than trying to dive headfirst into your partner organization's books based on an unfamiliar system, based on protocols that they might have that we're not familiar with. The easiest thing to do would be to go in with R1S where we are familiar with the system, we are familiar with the protocols and requirements, and is really easy for us to get in there and understand the data. So I really cannot stress that enough, that is the preferred option. We tried to make it a mandatory option, but council wouldn't let us. So so here we are.
And then Amy answered also to your question, Cassie. Most counties, municipalities have law enforcement capabilities, even if the project doesn't have a law enforcement agreement. They may just need to be part of the conversation with the partner when setting up the partner operations plan or when things come up where the project needs that additional support. Yeah, thanks, Amy, for that clarification. I also wanted to, I hope you don't mind me calling on you, Alan Earhart, but since you're going through this right now, you're kind of in the workings of trying to get a nonprofit partner on board. Do you just want to maybe share a little bit of your experience as you're going through this?
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Right now, I think the main thing that I've been seeing just in some of the preliminary discussions and meetings is it's really nice to find somebody that has like-minded interest in the facilities and looking to better serve the public. And from the opportunities that we've had to see some of the operation, they truly seem to operate this facilities the same way that we intend for them to be operated. So I think it's just a really exciting time. Sometimes you got to step out of the box and try some new things, and hopefully it's going to help us move farther in the future.
Thanks, Alan. Kevin asked if Congress can authorize fee retention for nonprofits. Why can't they authorize for us? They did. In WRDA 24, we got fee retention. We are just trying to figure out how that actually will work. And I don't know if Ryan, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, there's no implementation guidance on it, but in the very same WRDA bill, the Corps did get fee retention. But there's a big but that goes along with that language. It doesn't say without further appropriation. So we have fee retention, yet those fees still have to be allocated back to the Corps along with the spending bill. So essentially nothing really has changed. However, we won't know for certain until we see the 26 conference bill of what they intend to do in terms of returning those funds.
Thanks. Josh mentioned that this is back to the law enforcement comment, that some counties adopt the same language as Title 36 so deputies and officers can enforce through their authority. And yeah, that's a great way to do it as well. You don't necessarily need to have a law enforcement contract, but they can enforce our same rules. And even if they don't adopt Title 36, there's so many similar things that a county or sheriff's office could have that they enforce, like, disturbing the peace or litter, or, they may have dog off leash rules. I don't know. So there's a lot of ways to go about getting that coverage and that assistance. Nicole asked, is there a possibility/benefit in co-management agreement for the sole purpose of wildlife and land management versus running a day use area or campground? So we have the ability to manage wildlife areas under other types of partnering authorities. This one in particular would not pertain to wildlife and land management because it's all about fee retention. The bottom line on the cost sharing is that fee collection and fee retention and reinvestment. And since we're not collecting fees in a wildlife area or a land management area, this type of agreement wouldn't be applicable. I've had people ask me the same thing on visitor centers. Could we do a challenge cost sharing agreement with someone for a visitor center? It's like, well, we don't charge for visitor centers, so no. But we can do challenge partnership agreements, the traditional challenge partnership agreements, or set up an MOU, or just allow simple contributions by another entity to help us manage those wildlife areas, or help with those visitor center operations. Lots of great questions. Thank you for asking them. Renell, go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Heather. I wanted to make one of the plug too, because obviously we've had the success that we've dealt with for these partnerships has turned out better than we had hoped. We're a little skeptical at first, but we also knew that our budget constraints were not going to allow us to manage those parks at where we wanted to be. So and when we first set up those partnerships, we did kind of scale back some of the duties that was being placed on the partner. But as things progressed, one of the biggest changes were like for the next year, one of the counties took over the utility costs because they realized that had generated some funds and whatever. So you kind of start to see that. Also, one thing that comes up is the partners will probably take on some initial costs of their own just to kind of get started, especially for us. They did have to come up with their own reservation system, being that some of the projects districts may be able to use R1S now. They may be able to, not have to deal with that part. But they will have some upfront costs. But like I said, as they get their feet wet, figure out where they are, they can definitely work to make those changes and the work responsibilities. So, you start to give more responsibility, especially some of the O&M stuff, to the partner, and then help you on the back end.
Thanks, Renell. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things we encourage is reach out to the places that have already been doing this or are about to get into these scenarios, and learn from them. That's why we have the Gateway page as well, to try and share any lessons learned. I'll take questions from today and I'll add some of those to the FAQs so that we all learn as we go. I mean, it's a new authority, and so there's growing pains with it. There's things, in fact, the first time around when we did the implementation guidance, as we got into these scenarios at Lanier and Allatoona, we went, maybe we need to address this thing or that thing. So we'll be constantly making improvements and trying to address issues as we go along. There's a question from Stephen. Any instances where a PSA that was formerly leased turns into a joint managed park, i.e. a state park no longer wants to fully cover all costs of operating, but is willing to co-manage it. Yeah, when we initially did the guidance on this, when it was the first time around, we were really worried about that happening, that all these outgrants would be like, wait a minute, there's an authority where I don't have to pay for everything anymore. And so we actually had put it in the guidance that those parks that were, if they were currently being leased by someone, that if they wanted to essentially discontinue their lease, but then do some joint management, those would have to be approved. At that time, you had to go all the way up to the Assistant Secretary of the Army's office, because we were just worried about an onslaught. Well, it didn't happen at all. We had not, well, I shouldn't say that. We had one park when I was talking with Dworshak that was interested in maybe switching to joint management because they couldn't afford to run the park completely anymore. And we were in some initial discussions, and then it never went anywhere. So we never even got it up to that request. When we updated the guidance in April, so when we released the ER in April, we lowered that down to be approval in headquarters because it takes a lot longer to run things up through the Pentagon. And because we weren't finding that to be a problem, we thought, well, we'll still keep it in there because we want to have the ability to have these discussions, but we don't want to just have outgrants saying, well, I don't feel like paying for everything anymore. But there may be instances where they go, hey, we're going to completely get out of this lease agreement because we can't afford to do it. Those would be instances where it might be good to say, okay, well, maybe we can co-manage. So it is an option, but it does require a little higher approval level just to make sure that that's the route we want to go.
Got it. Thanks, Heather.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're coming up on almost an hour. Any final questions? You can either ask out loud or type in the chat. All right. Well, I'm not hearing any. As always, feel free to reach out to me or Ryan or both of us on any of these things. If you're thinking about doing this and need a little bit of assistance, we can also connect you with the folks who are already in progress on working on them. Because like I said, the very first slide, this has been put forth to us by our director of operations that we will do more of this in the next year. So we want to help you as much as we can to be successful in getting there. Right, I'm going to stop the recording.